الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك. اللهم فقهنا في الدين. O Allah, give us the understanding in our religion. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه وخليله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت وسلمت وباركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين. Dear Muslims, the subject of this khutbah is the contribution of the Muslim scientists to humanity. Out of the Islamic teaching, Muslims should seek knowledge. And the knowledge is not just limited to Islamic knowledge. We read in the Quran, قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Say they are not equal, those who have the ilm and those who do not have the ilm, they are not equal. And the Quran does not say about religious knowledge, it's all the ilm. And Allah tells us in Surah Al-An'am, وَهُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ النُّجُومَ لِتَهْتَدُوا بِهَا فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ. It is He, Allah Almighty, who has made the stars for you to be guided in the darkness of the land or the sea, the stars. And then He says in the end of the verse, قَدْ فَصَّلْنَا الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ. We have made the signs very clear for those who know. The stars has nothing to do with the religion. The ilm is more than the religious knowledge. ومن آياته خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم إن في ذلك لآيات للعالمين. And among His signs, the signs of Allah, the creation of heavens and earth, and the fact that your color and your tongues are different. And in this are signs للعالمين, for the scientists. Heavens and earth, colors, tongues is not religious knowledge. وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. And Allah has taught Adam the names of all things. And the names of all things are not religious names. And the Quran has taught us to learn from anyone, including animals. In the story of Adam, the crow, Al-Ghurat, taught the son of Adam how to bury his son, how to bury his brother. In the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam with the hudhud, أَحَطْتُ بِمَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ. The hudhud, the bird, is telling Sulaiman, I have given a knowledge that you do not have. And out of this religious teaching from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muslims went everywhere to seek knowledge. And the Quran instructed them that the first step for seeking knowledge begins with reading, iqra. And the second step is وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, thinking. The reading and then the thinking, the observation. Just because Western Europe languished in the Dark Ages does not mean that the rest of the world was also in Dark Ages. In the 11th or 9th through the 15th century, Muslims went everywhere to explore knowledge. They started by translating the Greek and the Persian books into Arabic, with one difference. They did not stop at the translation. They took the contents of those books and they started the observation and experimentation. The Greek and the Persian, they had a lot of theories, but they were afraid of testing those theories and hypotheses. The Muslims took it further by testing those theories, by observing and thinking. To give an example, it was the understanding for the eye to see an object. A ray of light comes from the eye to the object itself. That was the belief of the Greeks. Al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham, a Muslim scientist, he wanted to test this hypothesis. What causes an eye to see an object? He sat in a dark room, and he found out in a dark room he cannot see anything, which means there is no ray from the eye that comes to the object. When the light were on, he was able to see the object. He concluded the reason why we see objects is not because there is a ray from the eye to the object, it is a reflection of the light from the object to the eye that makes the eye see the object. Muslims took the theories, they took it under observation, and then they corrected them. Al-Razi, a Muslim scientist in the field of medicine, he wanted to establish a hospital in Baghdad. He wanted to find out what is the best location for that hospital. He hung pieces of meat in different locations in Baghdad. And he said the location that the meat will not rotten for the longest number of days is a fit location for the hospital, because it means that location has fresh air, has less humidity, to make the meat not rotten so fast. Muslims took the theories and they put it into practice, and they were able to move from the theory to practice. In so many fields, Muslims had their contributions. Hundreds of years before Europe did. In the field of medicine, Ibn Sina authored 200 books in medicine. He was also a famous psychiatrist. A young man, he was delusional, and he thought that he was a cow. And they brought Ibn Sina to treat him. Ibn Sina told him, if you are a cow, they will bring a knife to slaughter you. But wait a second. You are too weak to be slaughtered. So we need to feed you so you get bigger so we can slaughter you. And the young man with his delusion started to eat. And Ibn Sina put the medicine for him in the food. And the young man was cured. I contacted a Muslim psychiatrist to ask him about this approach. He said, first of all, legally, you're not supposed to give the patient the medicine without his permission. I said, I'm not talking about legal opinion. What is the medical opinion? He said, what Ibn Sina has done is very scientific. First, you never challenge a mental patient about his delusion. You need to build the trust first. And that's what Ibn Sina said. You're a cow, we'll bring a knife to slaughter you. Second, to be able to use the delusion of the patient to cure him is the best approach. And that's what Ibn Sina has done. Ibn Sina is a Muslim doctor that had his footprint on Europe years before Europe knew what hospitals and doctors are. His approach for treating a patient is to go through the analysis, a urine test and a blood test. What is the first thing you do today when you see a doctor? A blood test and a urine test. Al-Zahrawi, another Muslim doctor, he commanded that women should be treated by women. And he instructed, in the first month of pregnancies, women should not take any medicine that we know today. Muslim scientists were not only men. Atiyya al-Ansariya, in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she was the first Muslim nurse, and she was treating the wounded in the battlefield. Zainab binti Abi Awd, another Muslim female doctor, she was specialized in treating the eyes. Ash-Shifa bint Abdullah al-Qurayshiyya, she was specialized in treating skin disease. She was a dermatologist. In the field of pharmacy, Muslims were the first to separate the field of pharmacy from the field of medical practice. They said it is two different fields. And they have introduced a connection between pharmacy and chemistry. And they were the first to try medicines on the animals first, to see the side effects before they try it on the humans. Ibn Sina himself, who was a Muslim doctor and a pharmacist, he invented 760 medicines. In the field of chemistry, the Greek knew chemistry as a big secret. And all what they wanted out of chemistry is money. And that is how to convert cheap metals into gold. Muslims demystified this science, and they said that copper and silver cannot be converted into gold. And they introduced experimentation into the field of chemistry. Jabir ibn Hayyan, he was the student of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. And you know Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq and his contribution to the religion. He introduced experimentation into chemistry, the process of filtration, titration, crystallization. He was the first to use the sensitive scale in weighing chemicals. 600 years before Europe knew about it. He divided poisons into 3 categories. Poisons that come from animals, like snakes. Poisons that come from plants, like opium. And poisons that come from metals, like mercury. Hundreds of years before Europe knew. In the field of physics, Muslims studied light. And they said light that we see today is made of different colors. And they were able to explain the rainbow and how light is composed of different colors. They were able to explain the eclipse of the sun and the moon. They were able to introduce the 3 laws of motion that people claim Newton produced 600 years before Newton died. The 3 laws of motion. In the field of physics, one of the Muslim scientists, Al-Kindi, he explained why the color of the sky is blue. And he wrote 6 books on music, believe it or not. Muslims had their contribution in the field of music as well. In the field of mathematics and algebra, Muslims invented the use of symbols for equations. They invented the number 0. They had solutions for quadratic equations and for trigonometry. Al-Khwarizmi, in the year 780, he wrote a book on how to calculate time using the sun. Ali ibn al-Shatir, he was the muazzin in the big mosque in Damascus. He was a muazzin, and he was able to invent a clock with which he can tell the time for the prayer. Ibn al-Haytham, in the year 965, he produced the equations for calculating the volumes of spheres and cylinders. In the field of astronomy, because of how we pray to Mecca and how we determine the beginning of the month, Muslims had a lot of contribution in the field of astronomy. They were able to measure the circumference of the earth. It was, in their time, 41,248 kilometers. And the accurate circumference of the earth today is 400,070. They were off by 3%. They were able to calculate how long the solar year is, and they were off by 3 minutes. In the field of plants, they produced ways to make medicine out of plants. They described how plants will produce plants, how the productivity happens between plants. Ibn Wafid, one of the Muslim scientists, he preferred that people who are seeking medication should start by plants and not take the actual medication. In the field of zoology, they categorize the animals into 4 categories. Some that live in the air, some that live in the water, some that live on the land, and some that live inside the soil itself. They introduced a way to dissect animals. One of the famous scientists in this area is Al-Jahid, and he explained how animals breathe. And he has a book called Al-Hayawan, the animal, in which he introduced how animals fight with each other. And it was in a very nice way, in a dialogue between a rooster and a dog. They introduced how to produce the best horses. And Arabian horses nowadays are the most expensive horses. In the field of geography, because of the Hajj journeys and because of the Muslim merchants traveling everywhere, Muslims had their contribution to the field of geography. Uqba bin Nafi stood at the edge of the Atlantic Ocean and he said, I swear by Allah, if I knew there is a land behind that ocean, I would have traveled to that land to convey the message of Islam. They understood geography. They were very expert in drawing maps. Ibn Battuta from Morocco, he traveled to Europe, to Asia, to Africa, to China. He visited 1,000 cities and he wrote about 1,000 people from different cultures, different tongues. Ibn Majid, he wrote maps on how to travel through the Indian Ocean. And the sailors, 300 years after his death, they would recite Al-Fatiha for his soul because of his contribution to the field of geography. In the field of social science, Ibn Khaldun created that social science, sociology. And he had a reason for creating it. First, he said that man cannot live by himself. He has to depend on others. And he gave an example. The loaf of bread that we eat. How many people are involved in producing that loaf of bread? It's not just a baker. It's a farmer who planted the wheat, who harvested the wheat, who sold it to the merchant, who cooked it until it became a loaf of bread. He said man cannot live alone. He has to depend on others. His sole purpose for sociology is to purify history from the impurity of historians. He said, historians, when they write history, sometimes they have their opinion in it. And sometimes they're influenced by the environment itself that they live in, or maybe by the political system or the economical system. So he invented sociology so that history would be history, not impacted or influenced by the historian who's writing history. And he was the first person ever to introduce the bibliography, and that is in his writings, in his books. He wrote everything about himself. This is where I was born, this is where I traveled, this is where I lived, this is the kind of jobs I got that we see in the books nowadays. Muslims had their contribution to science. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ادعوا الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي لا غيره ولا رب سواه، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. The Quran commands us to seek knowledge, not just religious knowledge. Begins by reading, begins by thinking, begins by observation and by experimentation. Muslim scientists included contribution from non-Muslims, from Jews and Christians, in the land that they ruled. Science for them was a way of unification. Many of the Muslim scientists were not Arabs. A lot were Persians, Turks, from different nationalities, from different even religious sects. The person who introduced An-Nahr, the Arabic grammar, was Sibawayh, and he was a Persian, not an Arab. Why is it important for us to talk about Muslims' contribution to science? First of all, this is our inheritance, and we should be proud of our inheritance. Second, we need to think about our contribution to science and the contribution of our children to science. We need to encourage them to search, to think, to apply to the best colleges and universities, to be specialized in the field that they like. We need them not to teach them to study to pass the exam. Teach them to study to be the best researcher, and to encourage them to invent and experiment. So many papers are written by non-Muslims about the Muslims' contribution to science. We need to look at those papers, ask our children to make it a research paper. One of the areas I read about is that Muslims were the first to discover the America. Unfortunately, I do not have enough time to validate the claim. It's an area we should ask our children to explore. It's our religious duty. The Quran says, read, study, be knowledgeable, and we need to be proud of it. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا بيننا ولا منا شقيا ولا محروما. اللهم آت نفوسنا تقواها وزكها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها. اللهم انصر الإسلام وعز المسلمين وأعلي بفضلك كلمتي الحق والدين. اللهم هذا الدعاء ومنك الإجابة. اللهم هذا الجهد عليك التكلان ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله وأقم الصلاة.